Welcome to Lean Agile Management Podcast, that helps you boost work efficiency, create culture of high performance, and build teams that thrive. Welcome to the lounge. Today on the show,
would you like predictability in your system? Would you like a better lead time on your projects? We need to have transparency so that everything will drill down from the strategic portfolio to the team, the project level. Otherwise, you'll have something that's detached from everything else that's going on. You are going to see things that you don't really want to see. It's really not a simple thing to do, but it's something that you need to do if you want to improve your business. Companies that are structured in that silo-based way, they will slowly die.
We're joined today by Annette Vendelbo. She's an accredited Kanban trainer and agile coach, public speaker, director and founder of Xvoto. Hi, Annette. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Dima, and thanks for inviting me.
Thanks for being here. So I know that you're very passionate about one specific topic that seems to be making a lot of waves in modern management, and that is transparency. Am I right?
Yeah, you are absolutely right. I've been doing quite a few transformations up till now, and I'm currently working on a big program using both Scrum and Kanban, and transparency seems to be, you can say, a difficult thing for both managers and teams to accept in some cases. Mm-hmm. So it's something that I'm struggling with every day, persuading people to get more transparency into their systems.
Mm-hmm. But if we go one step back, what is it actually about? How can we define transparency? Is it just like putting glass walls in the office, literally, monitoring and like reporting?
Well, in fact, it's actually transparency on all levels. The examples that you mentioned might be a few of them, but if you're looking at, for instance, a Kanban system, we want to know what's going on in our business. We want to know what people are doing. We want to have transparency about our capacity and not only a dream about what we would like our capacity to be. And we want to have transparency because we want to be able to make the right decision based on what is really happening and not what we think is happening. That's why transparency is so very important at all levels.
Okay, and you mentioned Agile and Kanban. So how do we connect it to Agile, and why is it so important for anybody going into Lean and Agile transformations?
Well, I guess what we have been struggling with in the more classic way of handling projects or handling teams is the fact that we don't really know what's going on, and we don't really know how activities enter into our system. That means that we're sometimes working on things at random and arbitrary. And in Kanban and in Agile, we are trying to get a better understanding on how things enter our system. This would be, if we're talking Kanban, the discovery Kanban part, so that we can make sure that we're doing the right things at the right time and doing the most important stuff first. But if we do not have that transparency, and if we don't have transparency over our processes as well, then we are in a situation where things will happen at random, and we get random results. That's not really... It's not really very efficient or effective, and it's costly if you do not spend your scarce resources the right way.
But you've mentioned that there are different levels to transparency. So what kind of levels are we talking about, and which levels maybe it's more important at?
Well, you could say that in many cases, you will be starting off your Agile initiative or Kanban or Scrum on the team level, but then you are having this team in a small bubble, and they might have transparency, but it doesn't really help until you expand that transparency to the teams with whom they interact, or even the management layer, the portfolio layer, even the strategic layer. We need to have transparency so that everything will kind of drill down from the strategic to portfolio to the team, the project level, so that everything is tied nicely together. Otherwise, you'll have something that's detached from everything else that's going on. So the more you can get a system connected from bottom to top and get transparency all the way, the more efficient your company is going to be, and the better the results of your projects or your efforts, whatever they might be.
Hmm. But then there are some things that would ring some bells in the heads of managers when they hear this, because obviously that means more than just executive board would see the strategy, more than just project managers would know what's happening and how things are measured. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? How do we approach such people?
It is in fact not very easy to do, because there are so many old habits and old ways of thinking management, a lot of silo thinking, and it can be a bit intimidating, or people might find it dangerous, because all of a sudden it looks like they're giving up some of their autonomy, some of the decisions, the decision power that they had. It might change, because things are now becoming more transparent, and you might be able to delegate decisions to the people that are actually doing the work, rather than keeping them on the management level. It's really not a simple thing to do, but it's something that you need to do if you want to improve your business.
Right. And now making the connection between the management and the teams, how would that kind of transparency initiative would look for them? So what do they have to do?
Well, on the team level, the transparency, the practicalities of it, that would be to have a Kanban board. Either it's a physical board, or it's a software system, or whatever, something that you can share, so that it does become visual what's going on in the system. And transparency is you are very clear on how you can visualize, and how that transparency is going to connect to what's going on between the teams and the managers. How are we going to visualize so that we do get the transparency between us, and we can agree commonly on what to do when, and how is the resource situation, and whatever else will pop up when you visualize what happens in your system. Because you could say the downside, which is not really a downside of transparency, is that you are going to see things that you don't really want to see. You are going to see things being blocked. You are going to realize that your flow efficiency might not be very high. You might be visualizing that we are between the silos, blocking each other for having a good flow in our system. So we are going to see all sorts of things, good and bad. And that might not be very comforting for everybody, because they might have had the understanding of what happened previously, that was actually very good or good enough. And then all of a sudden you are putting the spotlight on things that were not really that good. So somehow you need to make it a step in a better direction, rather than some finger pointing exercise where you are pointing back and looking at what happened before and saying this was really not very good. This is not the point of it all. The point of it all is that we do want continuous improvement, and the way of getting there is to knowing what's going on in our system, and that requires visualization. Visualization will give you transparency, and then we're back again, I guess, to your question.
But if we suggest all of that, what kind of great outcomes can people expect from it?
The transparency will give you the opportunity to see what's really going on in your system, rather than what you think is going on. Because what everybody used to have on little sticky notes on their desks, or in Excel sheets in their PCs, little to-do lists here and there, all of a sudden everything is being brought together in one single place, which would be your Kanban board. Again, either physical Kanban board or software system. All of a sudden you can see everything that's going on, and you can determine, are we in fact doing the right things? Are people doing things just because of old habit? They used to do it, so they are doing what they always did without questioning whether this is sensible or not. All of a sudden you get a completely different dialogue, because you can see what's actually going on. And you can say, well, this is not going to remove complexity in whatever you're doing. And if you are dealing with programs or projects or any kind of teamwork where a lot of complexity is involved, the complexity is not going to be minimized, but you can see where you can all of a sudden get a different picture of the risk. You can see where things are where you have bottlenecks in your system, and you can can decide to do something about it. But you need to have the conversation. We have some bottlenecks. Can we accept them or not? Sometimes you can do something about it. Sometimes you can't. You can just sit down and wait because of whatever reason. But at least it gives you the opportunity to go and look where are the biggest bottleneck and then remove them one by one. And in time, your flow efficiency is going to go up. Your lead times are going to go down. Throughput's going to increase. All these good things are going to happen if you react on what you see. But this is this is a mindset thing. This is a culture thing. This is a people thing, which is actually making it more difficult. We are human beings.
For better or for worse.
Yeah.
But I bet in your practice, working with transparency and advocating it, you have some kind of maybe surprising examples of what teams found out. Do you have some kind of case in mind that really shocked the team maybe, or something exciting that they've learned from embracing transparency?
Yeah, I do in fact have examples of both, and I can say on my I have an example from my current program, which is a very big program, and there are many teams, and there are a whole lot of dependencies between these teams, a whole lot of cross-team issues, collisions, all sorts of things are happening, which is making things less efficient than they could be. So the first thing I try to do here is to try to visualize all these cross-team issues or blockers or dependencies, whatever. So we had a big workshop with everybody involved, and we discussed all of these issues. We visualized them on a big wall, in fact, and the result there was really scary because I decided to use red notes whenever some team had to deliver something to somebody else, and there were very, very many red notes. Mm-hmm. And in this example, you would have the management level say, well, we can't have that because we can't have this picture. It looks bad. And my reply would be, well, things are, in fact, this is reality. And we cannot change reality. This is our reality, and we need to deal with it. And the more clear it is to us, to everybody, where the dependencies lie, the better we can act on them. And now, slowly but surely, we are getting rid of one dependency after the next. We are getting a dialogue between teams in place where they're discussing how they can help each other minimize or mitigate these cross-team issues. And we are having examples of several teams sitting together saying, well, I have an issue that reminds me of what the issue that you have, and can we somehow get to a point where we agree a good way forward for this particular kind of issue? So you all of a sudden get a dialogue in place because you can see that there is something to talk about that can benefit everyone. So this is an example where you can see where you can say that people got scared about everything being visualized because all of a sudden they saw how complex everything was. And things are complex when you're working with 12 teams, I believe we have. Of course there will be complexity, but I want to know where it is so that I can react.
It actually shows how first, it can be difficult for both management and teams to accept it, but in the end, both parties involved and everyone in between reaps the fruit of it if people actually get it, if they understand it.
Yes.
Also sounds like this is maybe the opposite of what transparency looked like traditionally in management, because some people would say, oh, what do you mean as transparency? We have it already. We have lots of reports. We know what's happening. We're fine. But I guess that's not even close to that, is it?
No, it's not. And again, I guess that the information is there, and it always probably was to some extent. And you're right, there are a lot of reports, there are a lot of Excel sheets lying around with budgets or MS project plans, etc. But you need to get them out of your PC or somebody else's PC instead of having everything in just one place. I'm not saying that you can get rid of reporting, because of course there is a legitimate need for reporting, because we are sometimes dealing with a very big amount of money, and it's only fair that we can explain what we're doing with that money, of course. That's another way of looking at transparency. But we're trying to get a structure around this communication structure, which is not only reactive, because that's part of the more classic way of doing things. But for instance, a Kanban system, it's fairly easy within a very short time to see that the trend is going in a wrong direction, so that you can proactively act on it. But that requires management also to change their ways and maybe get away from the idea that we only meet once every month to discuss these things. Again, another example, I was working on a big project, and we had a meeting, a steering committee meeting, and a couple of days after, I needed an answer from the steering committee, and there was some 25 days until the next steering committee. But these are managers sitting in the committee, and they're not very easy to get together, and nobody can make a decision without everybody else being there. So I had to wait for a decision for almost a full month. This is not really very efficient. So again, if we have that kind of transparency and we change our ways so we can get almost on-demand decision-making, that's going to improve our lead times, flow efficiency, all the things that we talked about just before.
And so far, the real transparency sounds like just a big, huge amount of honey. It's all sweet, it's perfect. Who wouldn't want to see what's happening in their teams and projects and the whole company level? Who wouldn't want to see all the blockers and bottlenecks? But then, are there any kind of downsides to it? Is it something we can overdo? Because some people who would object it would say, oh, isn't that too much information for people to know? I wouldn't want to share some things. So are there any negative sides, and where do we draw the line?
Well, I don't really think that you can overdo it. I mean, there are certain things that if you're looking at strategies or different things that you need to keep secret because of competition or whatever else. Obviously, you can't share everything with everybody, but keep in mind that not everybody will like it. You need to figure out what's in it for everybody else. If you can explain why this transparency is a good thing, for both on the team level and certainly also looking from the company perspective. If you can explain why why we want to go this way, then it's much easier to get people's buy-in, because if first of all, there is an awareness that, wow, we have something called transparency. Could we use it? And then try and figure out what's in it for me as a person, what's in it for everybody else. And then have that discussion. Should we try and do this? And then maybe again, sometimes things are spreading like water, like rings in the water. So I'm having a personal Kanban board. In fact, I'm sitting here with one behind me, and I'm always using Kanban on my projects, and that makes people curious. So even if you can't persuade anybody else to do it, then put up a piece of brown paper on the wall and you start being transparent, and then people will get curious. What are you doing here? What are you getting out of it? And then slowly it will spread. Or you can have a discussion as a team. Should we try and go for some kind of board where we can show each other what we're doing, and then taking it step by step. But before persuading somebody else, you need to try to articulate what's in it for them. And then very often it happens that when that transparency starts in one team, then they will have better results, and that will make managers curious. Why is this team doing so much better than everybody else? And then you have a new discussion at the higher level, and then then the ball starts rolling. That's what sometimes happens when it's not a management decision to say simply, we need to do this. So you can do it from both the personal level, start there, and then just expand.
I guess it's one of the most powerful things people can do is leading by example.
Yeah. Exactly.
It's most contagious.
It is really contagious. Plus, it's more fun. It's more fun to work in that way, to be honest. Yeah, I know it sounds a bit hippie-like maybe, but I'm very concerned about my teams being happy when they wake up in the morning and go to work. And I've found that teams working in this way, with the transparency, with the dialogue that we have in the team, they're usually more happy, and happy people, they're more productive. So looking at it also from the company or from the project management perspective, I like happy and productive people. And that's one of the good things that you get out of working this way.
Yeah, I guess that actually answers one of my other questions, which is how do we make such a transformation for transparency last? How do we make this something that stays with us, not just one-time event when we suddenly reveal all the problems, get rid of them, and then we go back to darkness?
Yeah. That's a very good question, in fact, because that's what you very often see, that when you start a transformation, everything is new, and everything is interesting. So you have management attention, and hopefully you have team buy-in, and whatever else needs to be there in order to make it work. And then all of a sudden you might get busy with a project, and then there's a tendency that you fall back and start doing what you always did instead of keeping this new focus. And what I'm trying to do is to push people gently in the back, saying, well, we need to do these things. This could be a matter of setting up some metrics that will show us if we are moving in the wrong direction. Let's say that we are measuring on again, flow efficiency, or we're measuring on throughput, or we're measuring on lead times, and all of a sudden we see the trend moving in a wrong direction. Then we can act on that, and if we consistently measure the things that can show us whether we are sticking to the new you could say rules of transparency or not, that can give us the answer on whether we need to enforce it somehow. It doesn't have to be, it's both carrot and stick, you can say, because the carrot is that you are going to get a more efficient system in the end, but the stick is a very small stick is necessary, because you are trying to move a culture in a different direction, in a new direction. And this means that if you know where you're going, and if you have management buy-in to say, yes, we really want this. This is what I'm seeing these days as well. We are having a big program, but we are also doing an agile transformation. So is it the agile transformation that wins, or is it the program that wins once we get close to the deadlines? So I'm trying to enforce the agile practices, the Kanban practices, but not at the expense of the program. But still, if this is the way that a company wants to go, and you do have the management buy-in, then you need to do whatever you can to set up a system that makes it clear whether we are forgetting this good practice. And in fact, it's quite easy to see, because let's say we have doesn't matter if you're working again in software systems or not, but if we have as a principle, we need to break down our tasks to get a better flow. And all of a sudden you see people are not breaking down tasks because they are too busy, so they think that they are saving time by not doing it, and you see the throughput decrease. That can be very easy to see that here you need to go in and work with that exact thing, that exact practice. Do break down things into comparable sizes so that we get consistency and predictability and all these good things in our system. Because again, if you're asking managers, would you like predictability in your system? Would you like a better lead time on your projects? Would you like to have higher throughput? Then I know that the answer will be yes, yes, and yes. So if these are the answers, and if this is the management buy-in that you have as an agile coach or specialist or consultant, then you also have the right to go in and look at what you're actually seeing happening in that system. And then you need to do something when you see that people are getting back to the old habits. And then it might be 2 steps one way and 1 step back, but as long as we are moving forward step by step, that's good enough. But this transformations like this, it can take 1.5, 2 years until it becomes a habit. And then all of a sudden you reach the place where you don't have to discuss, should we be agile, should we work with Kanban or whatever else, because you're doing it as the most natural thing, and you wouldn't dream of going back to where you were before. But the transformation takes quite a bit of time, and it does require a small little stick to push people in that direction and work according to the rules that everybody had bought into when we started off in the first place. You just tend to forget it once you get busy. Then you're just us back to old habits. So.
Yeah. And looking into the future, I'm guessing this is becoming more of a requirement than an option, because you've mentioned Spotify, and there are numerous examples. There is Buffer, who is the whole company is famous for their culture and for transparency. And I think they might have gone a bit too far for some people, because they actually they want 100% transparent. They share revenue numbers, sales, everything real time on a dashboard that management uses for strategic decisions. But for more down to earth, for more traditional kind of companies, how would a future look like if they decided, okay, transparency is not something we want, as opposed to some other companies who went for it? And do you think it actually becomes more of a requirement?
I do think so, because things are moving so extremely fast these days when you're looking at technology. And I can see that I've been working a lot in the financial sector and also in the pharmaceutical sector. And in both cases, it's very competitive environments. So if you have your competitors improving their results because they have decided to move in a more agile direction and getting more transparency, then I think that if you don't do it, then things are just going to run away from you, your competitors. So I guess that the competition is going to force many companies in this direction. The example that you mentioned, well, I would personally be very fine with that. What's the big problem? But I know that it's more persuading managers to accept that all this should be transparent. I know that there's an example from Bjarte Buksnes, who's managing a big company. They had transparency about something like their travel budgets, where they said, well, everybody can see what everybody is spending on travel, on hotels and meals, stuff like that. And that was from the highest management level down to the lowest employee. Right. And what happened is they saved a lot of money because they didn't have to do so much administration and checking are people following rules. Are they doing what they're supposed to do according to our travel guidelines? All of a sudden they said, let's get rid of all that. Behave as if it was your own purse that you have to pick out of your pocket. And what happened is that they saved money on travels. They saved money on administration and all of this, simply because they decided to say, we're going to make everything transparent to everybody. And I know that they have expanded that principle to other parts of the organization. How far they have gone with that, I don't know. But this is an example, again, about how transparency can give you financial better results than when it wasn't there. But again, when you have the transparency and you know where your blockers are, where your problems are, and you can very easily adapt to new market conditions or whatever, if you are talking or thinking in a more classical way, then there is a tendency that you are always having several years perspectives on projects you're doing or programs. In many cases, there are very long perspectives, and what you do see these days is that technology changes so quickly. So what might be a good idea when you started the project might be a very bad idea when you're 1 year into the project. So in these systems, this is something that you will discover very quickly, and you can adapt to new market conditions or new technology coming up or whatever else is happening. So this way, inspect and adapt, and all these principles that are in Kanban, in agile systems, this is making this is more healthy in all perspectives. Both when you're talking about your budgets, you're not going to spend budget on something where technology has taken over and gone to a completely different place, or changing requirements because your customer finds out that I actually wanted something else. than what I asked for in the first place, fine. It might be it comes with a price. Everything has a price, but you will get more value out of the system, and you will get more fit for purpose businesses, if you will, because you are able to adapt very quickly, because you have transparency in what you're doing and in your strategies, portfolios, all these things we talked about before. So I guess to get back to your question, I think that there is, you will be in trouble if as a company, if you don't start looking this way, unless you have a monopoly, which is very few. Or if you have money enough, I mean, and you don't care how you spend it, but it's very rare that I've seen that situation.
Yes, and I guess even in those cases, if they stay there for long enough, somebody will catch up.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yes. Well, just to summarize everything that we've said, if we put two companies next to each other, one that that works against transparency because they're afraid of it and they don't want to see anything, and one that embraced it, how different would they be? What would be the things that make them completely different?
Well, I guess that employees in the transparent company would probably be more satisfied with their work situation because they can see how they fit into the puzzle. And that's one thing that I've seen. I mean, in previous employments or in some of the companies that I've been working with as a consultant, you would see people saying, well, I'm doing this, but I have no idea what it's going to be used for. And that's not really satisfying as a person if you cannot see where do you fit in, where does my work fit in to the big puzzle. So I think that both when it comes to employees, that is less stress because all of a sudden you have a balance in your system. You know how much you have the capacity to do because that's transparent as well, and you know what competencies you have, and you can match the competencies with the requirements for those competencies. So that means that you get a more balanced system, which will, in the end, produce quicker projects because you can focus on one project at a time, and you have that mentality. You have the mentality to focus rather than task switch forever. In the other company that doesn't have that kind of transparency, and where if you think about it, it would require that there's one person or very few persons sitting, leading this company that can understand everything that's going on from top to bottom. So you do not have that bottom-up intelligence that you will also have in the more transparent companies where you're sharing knowledge, because everything in the other company would usually be top-down. So again, that's I think that's a kind of company structure that, and again, I'm not very fond of looking in crystal balls because I'm not wiser than anybody else, but it's if I were to make a guess, then I would say that companies that are structured in that very classic hierarchical silo-based way, they will slowly die. And again, maybe in 10 years we can go back to this, and I might be right, I might be wrong, who knows. But what I can see now is the tendency towards moving in the agile direction. It's very huge, at least here in the Nordics where I'm based. And I don't see that trend stopping anytime soon.
Wow, that's a very strong encouragement, words of encouragement. And this sounds great. And thank you so much for spending this time today with us, sharing your expertise on transparency.
You're very welcome. And again, thanks for inviting me.
If you're watching us on YouTube, leave us a like. Thanks for joining us, and see you here next time.